Over 1 million Indian soldiers fought for the British Empire in World War I. They served in trenches across Europe and the Middle East, with the clear expectation that their loyalty would be repaid with political reforms and a real step towards self-governance. But when the war ended, the reward was not autonomy. In March 1919, the British government passed the Rowlatt Act, a harsh set of laws designed specifically to crush political dissent in India. The Rowlatt Act effectively legalized tyranny. It stripped away basic human rights, allowing colonial authorities to arrest any Indian citizen without a warrant and keep them in prison indefinitely without ever standing trial. The backlash was immediate. Massive protests erupted. Shops closed in nationwide strikes, and in response, the British quickly arrested prominent local leaders to try and silence the crowds. In the province of Punjab, the situation escalated. The British imposed martial law to regain military control of the streets, but they failed to communicate this decree to the vast rural population living outside the city centers. The empire took a moment ripe for political cooperation and turned it into a trap, punishing the very people who had just bled for them on the battlefield. That trap snapped shut on April 13, 1919. It was Baisakhi, the traditional spring harvest festival. Thousands of rural families and pilgrims traveled into the city of Amritsar to celebrate the new year and visit the Golden Temple. Having no idea that martial law was in effect, nearly 20,000 civilians eventually gathered in a nearby vacant lot to rest, listen to speeches, and celebrate. The place was called Jallianwala Bagh. Jallianwala Bagh was a sunken 6-acre dirt lot, hemmed in on all sides by the high, windowless rear walls of residential houses. Entrance and exit were restricted to a single alleyway, barely wide enough for 5 people to walk abreast. The physical geography of that walled-in garden perfectly mirrored the political reality of the Rowlatt Act. The Indian people were completely boxed in by a suffocating authority, with no way out. Late that afternoon, Brigadier General Dyer marched down that single narrow alleyway with heavily armed troops. Dyer immediately positioned his riflemen to block the only exit. He carried no megaphone. He gave the crowd 0 warnings to disperse. He simply gave the order to fire. For 10 continuous minutes, the soldiers unloaded on the trapped civilians. They fired 1,650 rounds of ammunition, and Dyer specifically directed his men to aim where the crowd was thickest. Absolute panic took over. People desperately tried to claw their way up the sheer walls. Dozens jumped into the garden's sole well to escape the hail of lead, only to drown or be crushed by the bodies falling in right behind them. Look at this wall. Those white squares highlight the dense clustering of bullet holes that remain today, proving how concentrated and targeted the firing was. The British government officially recorded 379 deaths. Indian estimates, based on local records, placed the fatalities well over 1,000. Dyer deployed 1,650 rounds with a singular intent to produce a wide-reaching moral effect through the calculated slaughter of his own subjects. The cruelty continued after the guns went silent. Because martial law included a strict curfew, no one was allowed out to provide medical aid. The wounded were left in the dirt to bleed out overnight. When asked to explain himself, Dyer told his superiors that his goal was never to disperse the crowd. He stated explicitly that he wanted to punish the Indians and produce a wide-reaching moral effect. The British government set up the Hunter Commission to investigate. The result was a shockingly lenient slap on the wrist. Dyer was merely relieved of his command and allowed to quietly retire. When Dyer returned to Britain, imperialist newspapers hailed him as a hero. They crowdfunded a massive reward for him, handing the disgraced general £26,000. To the Indian public, this institutional cover-up and public payout proved one thing clearly. British law existed solely to protect the colonizer and subjugate the colonized. Any lingering illusion of a benevolent, civilized British Empire died in the dirt of Jallianwala Bagh. India's elite cut their ties. Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore wrote a scathing letter to the viceroy and returned his British knighthood in absolute disgust. Mahatma Gandhi, who had previously supported the British in the war effort, realized that peaceful cooperation with this system was no longer possible. He launched the non-cooperation movement. The national conversation immediately shifted from requesting legal rights within the empire to demanding total independence from it. General Dyer thought a massacre would crush the spirit of rebellion. Instead, he unified a deeply fractured nation against the crown. While leaders like Gandhi fought with policy and boycotts, another path to justice was forming in the mind of a young man named Udham Singh, who had survived the massacre and witnessed the aftermath firsthand. This map traces an incredible 21-year journey. Singh carried the trauma of Jallianwala Bagh across the globe, adopting multiple aliases and working grueling labor jobs across 4 continents to fund his singular mission for revenge. Politicians were dismantling the British system legally. Udham Singh represented the visceral need for a personal reckoning against the architects of the trauma. That reckoning arrived on March 13, 1940, in the heart of London, outside Caxton Hall. Singh smuggled a revolver inside a hollowed-out book into a meeting room. He walked up and shot Michael O'Dwyer, the former lieutenant governor of Punjab, who had explicitly approved Dyer's massacre 2 decades earlier. This was a patient, targeted strike against the empire, executed on its own soil. Today, a towering red stone memorial stands at Jallianwala Bagh. It marks the exact spot where thousands of innocent people were trapped. The 1,650 bullets intended to compel submission instead became the weight that broke the British Rajah's moral authority forever.